I'm excited. Hey, listen, tonight I want to ask you, have you ever looked around and thought, I wonder how this thing was made? Like, has anybody in here watched the show How It's Made before? Yeah, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's gross. Don't ever go look at how they make hot dogs. You'll never eat one again. But sometimes it's interesting. And I think there's something about how things were made that we naturally might be intrigued by. Maybe you're like me. I like to take things apart. I like to look inside and see how things work together, how they were created to work together. Does anybody here watch cooking shows on Netflix? Yeah, right? Some of you, maybe not. Listen, I am the worst person to watch these shows. You see, because my food critic abilities are not very good. You put something in front of me and I'm like, this food is good. This food needs more hot sauce. That's it. That's all I can do. I would not be good at this show. And when I watch these shows, I'm like, yeah, that food is way overpriced. That food is way too expensive. But when you watch some of these shows and you go behind the scenes and you see these chefs who are experts, the top of their field, and you watch how they create these things that look so simple, it all kind of comes alive. And I begin to see that every single thing on that plate that might look weird, might taste weird, has a very specific purpose and intent for why it's there. And so I think me and us naturally sometimes are curious about how things were made, and I think this is the truth I want us to look at tonight. It's when you know how something was made, you can better understand its purpose. And I'll relate this to you. I'll say it this way. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. What is your purpose? Why are you here? Why do we interact with each other the way we do? When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. And so tonight I want to talk about how you and I were made. Not literally, that's gross. Not going there. But I want to talk about how God created us, about God's intent and design for us, so that we can better understand our purpose. And tonight specifically, to better understand our purpose in regards to relationships, to dating, and yes, I'm gonna say it, sex. Yeah. So, before we jump in, I'm asking you two things, right? The first thing I'm gonna ask you to do is just relax, all right? Breathe, we're gonna be okay. I know you may want to crawl under your chair. You may want to stand up and leave. I don't know what it is, but listen, just relax. Safe place. It's not going to get weird, I promise. The second thing I want to ask you to do is this. Don't assume you know what I'm going to say. And regardless of what I do say, I just ask that you hear me out. For the next few minutes, as I paint this picture, I just want you to promise me that you can follow along. Listen, you're high school. You're like old. You're a few years from having to pay taxes. Some of you are paying taxes. So I think we can hit this well. I think we can talk for the next few minutes and do it in a good way. So listen, I'll never forget the first time I asked a girl on a date. You see, I don't know, we're laughing. I did get a date. I was in the 7th grade. Yeah, that's right. 7th grade, and the junior high dance was that Friday. And this was back before promposals. This was back before you would ask someone to homecoming or out with these like super extravagant gestures that you would film and go viral. No. The only thing this required of me was I had to get up at lunch, walk across the cafeteria, and in front of this girl, I'd have to ask her in front of all of her friends and her table full of friends if she would be my date to the dance. Yeah. So, it was a lot. And listen, there was one girl in particular. Listen, she was beautiful, she was popular, probably out of my league, but for some reason, I was convinced I would at least give it a shot. And so I told my friends because I needed my boys. I needed my support. And the day of, I'm like a wreck. I'm sweating, I'm shaking, I can't eat at lunch. I didn't even want to go to school that day, but my boys are like, you got this. You got this. She's right over there. Here we go. And I'm like, dang. Before I knew it, I was standing up, and they were like, go, 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 go. I'm like, all right, I can't sit back down. Everyone's looking at me. I've got to do something. So the whole cafeteria is looking at me. I walk what feels like the longest walk of my life. I go over to this girl, and I say, would you be my date to the dance this weekend? This is 7th grade, okay? And I don't know what I said. That's what I intended to say. But to my surprise and my relief, she actually said yes. And so I tried to play it really cool. I was like, bet. I was like, I'll see you there, all right? And I like walked off super cool. As soon as I got out of the cafeteria with my boys, we were like, yo, we did it! And I was like high-fiving. I was on top of the world. I was like, this beautiful girl not only noticed me, not only knows my name, but she's my date today. I'm about to walk in there and be like, that's right, this is my date. Everybody check it out. And so I'm pumped. Fast forward to Friday. My mom drops both of us off at the dance. This is 7th grade, okay? She drops us both off at the dance. We walk in, and as we walk in, we take a picture together. Little did I know, that would be the last time I would see my date at the dance. You see, because what she didn't tell me was, although she had said yes to me, she had also said yes to someone else. So she decided that she was going to let me take her to the dance, but she was going to spend the dance with someone else. I know. So as you can imagine, 7th grade me was crushed. I was embarrassed. I was a wreck. I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. I was like confused, ashamed, heartbroken. I was like, how could she do this? Like, we had a good thing going for like 3 days, and she's gonna throw all of it away for that guy? And so I was a mess. My whole world had been turned upside down. I felt like life was over. Well, to make it even worse, it got more awkward when my mom picked both of us up to take her home that night. So yeah. So, what you need to know about that story is that girl became my wife. I'm just kidding. Gotcha. But listen, the reason I tell you such an embarrassing story that doesn't hurt at all, I promise. I don't still think about it. The reason I tell you that story is this. Relationships have a massive influence in your life. All your relationships, not just dating, but the people you surround yourself with, the people on your teams at your school, your friends, your coaches, your teachers, your siblings. Your relationships have massive influence in your life, both good and bad. But one of the relationships that has the most influence in your life is your dating relationship. And so what I want you to see is that God created and wired you this way. This is not an accident. The reason relationships have such an influence in your life is because this is how God created and wired you. Listen, in the very beginning, in the creation story itself, the beginning of the Bible, as God creates everything, the sun, the moon, and the stars, God says that he looks at it. The Bible said he looks at it and he said, it is good. When he created dry land out of the water, it says that God looked at it and said it was good. When he created animals on the land and animals in the oceans, it says that he looked at it and he said it was good. And then on the day that God created us, humans, it says when God was done that he looked at it, and I want you to see what he said. It says, the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. He said, I will make a helper suitable for him. I want you to see that the first human crisis, the first human problem was loneliness. And God decided to step in and fix the problem. God wired you and me for relationships. Now, the first one we see is a husband and wife, right, who go on to be married. But God designed you for relationships, to live life with other people, and a huge relationship in your life God intended to hopefully one day be someone else, a spouse, a significant other, whoever that is. And so what I want you to see is right after this, further on, God describes what takes place next. Look at this. It says, "This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." Now, I don't know if I need to paint a picture for you, but right here, God is describing what takes place when a man and a woman are married. And this is God's design. It's you leave your family. You leave everything behind, your childhood, your family structure, and you connect to this person. Not just physically, but your very lives itself. And so here's a newsflash. Whatever it is you think about sex, whatever you've been taught, whatever you've heard, whatever people say, whatever you may think, whether you think it's great or wrong, whether you think it's dirty or something we shouldn't talk about or should talk about, here's what I want you to see. God created it. In the very beginning, this was God's idea. And I need you to hear that tonight. That regardless of what you are told out there, I want you to see that from the beginning, it was God's idea. And I want you to see when you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. When you see how God created things, you can better understand their purposes. Listen, when I was 10 years old, my dad took me to my uncle's ranch with my cousins. And when we got to this ranch, it was a 10-year-old boy's dream. We went out there and we just rode ATVs, we shot guns, we hunted, we blew stuff up, we barbecued. It was like every 10-year-old boy's dream. Well, while we were there, my dad told me one night, he said, "You see that pile of brush over there?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I got a job for you." I was like, "Oh, 10, I'm old. I'm important." He said, "Tomorrow, I'm going to let you burn that brush." He's like, "I've got a job. We got to get rid of it. It's not supposed to be here." She's like, "Tomorrow, I'm going to give you this job, and I'm going to help you burn this." And I was like, "Awesome. I'm pumped. I can't even sleep tonight." A 10-year-old boy gets to play with fire. I'm like, "What's up?" And so I told my cousins, like, "Hey, my dad's got a job for me. You guys can come, I guess." It's a big deal. Well, the next day, we go off, right? We're doing all this stuff. We're riding ATVs. We're shooting guns. We're doing all this stuff. At the end of the day, it starts to get late. And I'm like, "Man, I think my dad forgot." I'm looking at that brush. I'm like, "Man, I'm supposed to go burn that. I've got a job. My dad has given me a job, but I think he forgot." And so you know what I did? I said, "Hey, guys, my cousins." I was like, "My dad told me that he wants us to go burn that brush." And so I was like, "Right now?" He's like, "Yeah, right now. For real, for real." And so I was like, "All right. I'm the oldest. I'm in charge. Let's do this." And I knew in my 10-year-old wisdom, I was like, I've seen my dad do this before. When he makes a fire, he just goes and gets this liquid and pours it all over it, and it goes, right? It's that simple, right? And so I was like, I know where I can find some of that stuff. There's some gas cans over here. And so I do what any 10-year-old boy does, and I go over, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And I just start going crazy on this brush. The whole can is gone. And my cousins, I was like, somebody have a match? One of them did. I was like, all right, you guys back up. I'm the oldest. Let me do it. This is my job. My dad asked me to do this. So I lit the match and threw it. You can imagine what took place next. Listen, gasoline is not like lighter fluid, all right? It's explosive. So the next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground. Everything hurt. And I was missing my eyebrows. And as I looked up, everything I could see was on fire. Not just the brush, but all the grass for like an acre. And before I knew it, my dad and our uncles were all on us, trying to pull us away, and we spent the next hour and a half fighting this fire that we had created. I had never gotten a spanking that bad in my life. And I've never learned a lesson better than I did that day. I won't forget. Listen, gasoline and fire don't mix. I'll just tell you. But here's why I tell you that story. My eyebrows grew back. It's this. Fire is awesome, right? to a 10-year-old boy, to us today, fire is awesome. Fire can be a good thing. In the proper context, when you surround fire with steel, you surround it with bricks, you put it in a fireplace, it is a good thing. It warms your home. You take a picture with it because it's nice and Instagrammy, right? You're like, my hot chocolate. It's good. We put it out here in a fire pit. We make s'mores on it. You surround it with stones outside. You camp next to it. The fire keeps you alive in the cold. Fire is a good thing. It's a gift. But if you take that fire and pull it outside of the proper boundaries, the proper confines and environment, it's destructive. It's confusing. It leads to pain. I know. I experienced it. And what I want you to see is that sex is the very same thing. Again, I want you to hear God created it. It's not a secret. It's not something he's hiding. From the beginning, God created this with an intent and a design and an environment and boundaries for it to be a good thing, something that gives life, something that is a gift, something that brings joy. But when you take it outside of those boundaries, it begins to bring confusion and pain and hurt. When we understand how we were made, we can better understand our purpose. So here's what I want you to see. One of the biggest struggles you and I face today is this. Everywhere you look, everything you see, you hear in music, in movies, on social media, at school, from everywhere, everything you're told is this, that sex is casual, that sex is not a big deal. It's just two people. It's just two bodies. It's like puzzle pieces. Listen, you do it to feel good. I eat because I'm hungry. If two people consent, if two people are up for it, what's the big deal? You're told everywhere you look that it's just casual. It's no big deal. There's no ramifications. There are no strings being woven and attached. But what I want you to see tonight, and hear me out, is this. It's that sex was made to matter. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. Listen, sex is more than just the mashing of two people. It's not. God designed it to be the joining of two people. Not just physically, but in heart, in soul, in very person. From the beginning, that was God's design. We see it written out for us right there. Listen, this is why breaking up with someone with whom you've had sex is so much more difficult. We say it's casual. It's no big deal. But when it comes to splitting, when it comes to difficult moments where you have to remove these bonds that you have made, it is hard. But everything will tell you it's casual. Everything will tell you it's no big deal. Sex is not just physical, even though the world may tell you that. It's a bonding, and God created us and sex for it to be that very thing. When you understand why you were made, how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. So listen, what are the boundaries? What are the confines? What is the environment that God created this for? What if you're like, I'm all about it, right? If God's idea, tell me when and how. Tell me where. I want to share that with you tonight. Listen, the way that God intended this to be is marriage. And before you think anything, I want to explain to you why. And just follow me for these few minutes. I want to show you why. Look at this. This is Ephesians 5:31. This right here is God's instructions for a husband and a wife. Listen, God willing, I would love to come to your weddings. God willing, I would love to perform your wedding. But if I do, and if I'm there, I pray to God that you read this verse because this is God's instruction. This is the picture that God is painting. This is what he designed you for in marriage. Look at this. He's describing, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Heard that before. He goes on to say, this is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. Don't miss this. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. As God describes a husband and a wife, God describes his picture for marriage. He's describing this, that marriage was meant to be a mirror image of what? Of Jesus and his people, of Christ and the church. That the love between a man and a woman in marriage was meant to be the same or reflection of Jesus' love for you. Think about that. I want to put it up here. I want you to see this simple image. Husband and wife is meant to be a reflection of Jesus and his people, of Jesus and you. And it's called a covenant love. This is not a promise. This is not a, I will do this one day. This is more than an agreement or a contract or a pinky promise. It's a covenant. You know what that meant in those days? A covenant was something you made before God with somebody. And it was an agreement so strong that you said, if I ever break this, you can kill me. I will die and give my life before I ever break this promise. Now think about Jesus' relationship with you. Think about Jesus' relationship with his people. How does he receive you? How does he receive his people? With grace, with love, with forgiveness. There is nothing that his people can do to change his love. There is nothing that's going to make him change what he has promised to do for you. It's a covenant. Jesus even gave his life for you. In the same way, God says, I'm giving you marriage. I'm giving you this gift that is meant to be a reflection to the world and for you. It's meant to point everybody and remind them that there is a God who loves you and will never leave you. It's a covenant. It's more than just an agreement or a contract. It's an agreement that says, regardless of what happens, I am not going anywhere. That's why in your vows you say through sickness, through health, through all the money we may have or the no money we will have, I am in till the end, till one of us dies. And only then will I leave. You have my whole life. And I want you to see, people are imperfect. You may not have seen this lived out in front of you, in your life, in your home, but I want you to see God's intent, God's design. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. God intended us to live with one another, with a spouse in a covenant love. It wasn't an agreement, wasn't a promise. It was not, well, you made me upset. You're not living up to these expectations. I'm out. No. When has Jesus ever left his church? When has Jesus ever abandoned his people? Never. So, listen, sex outside of these confines, of this environment that God designed and gave us the model for, eventually and will lead to confusion and pain and sorrow. Why? Because God intended it to be a joining of two people, more than just the physical. God gave it as a gift so that those two people who promised their lives, all of them, their mistakes, their faults, their failures, their baggage, everything that was behind them, everything that would come, God intended it to be a gift to help those two people say, I'm in till the end. We're one. And so anything outside of that will eventually, when you connect yourself to someone else in that way, outside of the security of that covenant of knowing you are in till the end, will eventually lead to confusion and pain. Listen, in the covenant, you're telling the person, I want all of you, everything. Here's all of me. Listen, you may be pressured otherwise. You may be pressured by somebody to say it's just casual. It's not a big deal. Listen, I promise. Here's a ring. What else do you want? Listen, one day we will get married. Listen, one day I will do all the things you ask. But right now, so I want to challenge you. I want you to know, unless that person is willing to make a covenant with you before God and everyone here, he is not, or they are not, or she is not worthy of experiencing all of you in that way. They may promise, they may say things, but unless they're willing to call me up and say, listen, I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's have a wedding. Let's in front of everyone say, hey, here's all of me. I'll take all of you. Not for today, not for tomorrow, not for a month, for a year, but for the rest of my life. And if they're not willing to make that commitment, then they're not worthy. They're not worth it. I want you to see God's design. I want you to see God's intent. This is the picture that God has painted and calling us to. But I want you to know, no one in here has not fallen short. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I want to be honest with the truth. I want to paint this beautiful picture of what God designed and is calling you to. But at the same time, I want you to know that the covenant love that God is painting a picture for these two people is the same type of love he's showing to you right now. And here's what I want you to see. I want to put it up on the screen. You were made for more than sex. The same way we're talking about it's casual, in the same way it's all you hear about, the same way it's maybe be all you think about. You may be getting pressure from all different places, but I want you to know that you were made for more than sex. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. You have worth because God created you. You in this room, God created you. That's where your worth comes from. Nothing else. Listen, if you've made a bad decision about sex, you still have worth. If you've used sex to prop up a relationship, you still have worth. If you've used sex to please someone else who is pressuring you, you still have worth. Sex cannot increase or decrease your value. Why? Because your value comes from how you were made. Your value comes from who made you. And sex is not where your value comes from. When you understand how you were made, you can better understand your purpose. God created you. God made you. That's where your worth comes from. So the two things I want to leave us with today is this. This is not easy. I don't want to stand up here and pretend. I don't want to stand up here and say, this is easy. I know what it's like. I live in the same world you do. I know what school is like. I don't want to pretend like this is easy. Listen, you're not going to go and leave this room and jump onto Instagram and Snapchat and everything else, and people are going to be championing this idea. Listen, God made sex, and he made it for a covenant relationship. You're not going to see that. You're not going to go to school tomorrow and have the conversation be about sex in this way. I know that. But what I want you to see is this is God's intent. This is God's design. The same God that made you intended it to be this way. And God called his people, those who would follow Jesus, to be countercultural, to be different, to go against the grain. And so I want you to know, I know this is not easy, but it's what Jesus has called us to. And the other thing I want you to know is this. If you've messed up, as we talk about this picture, this that God has designed for us, if you've messed up, I want you to hear me. You're not alone. You're not the only one in this room. You'd be surprised. And I want you to know that the same grace and love, forgiveness, and bond that God is describing between two people is the same type of love, forgiveness, grace that he is showing to you. You have worth. Regardless of the mistakes you've made, regardless of the things that people may have pressured you to do or that you regret doing, you have worth because of how you were made, because of who made you. You are not alone. And the same love that God is describing is for you. And so I want to remind you of this. I want to share with you a story of one of your leaders who's experienced this in some way.
Hi, my name is Katie Hendricks, and I am a small group leader for the 11th grade girls that meet at the Vandergrift's home. I stepped over the line of faith as a child, so I was surrounded by lots of great friends, great Christian family. I was very involved in the church, actually had keys to that before a car, so it was kind of nuts. As a teenager moving into those years, a lot of people were really pushing for abstinence, and there was the whole True Love Waits movement and all of that stuff. And I knew that setting clear boundaries for myself when it came to sex and relationships was going to be really important. Also, so that way I had a plan before I got into a serious relationship or any kind of relationship so that I could stick to those boundaries more easily. Before I went to college, I made sure to break up with the high school guy that I was dating at the time. And when I got to college, I realized after my parents left that I was alone. And my roommate tried to get me out there to socialize some because she could see that I was really upset. So she wanted to meet this guy that she'd met online, so she wanted me to go with her. And he brought his roommate along. We met in the cafeteria because, gotta be safe. And so they're talking about their music and whatever they had talked about online. And then this other guy, the roommate, and I got to talking, and he was so my type. Like, I thought he was so cute right off the bat. He was tall, he was athletic, he was, it was just everything that I thought that I wanted. Before we knew it, we were dating, and it was kind of a cool situation because I thought I was, totally in control, and here I am, this mature college student. I know exactly what's going on with my life, when really I didn't. The boundaries that I had set for myself, he slowly pushed past them, and before I knew it, and I wouldn't have even known the words to put on it at that time, I was in a very abusive relationship, physically, emotionally, mentally, and sexually. So he had pretty much control of everything. I pushed a lot of the boundaries and broke a lot of the boundaries that I even thought, and even lost my virginity through date rape. So obviously I was in a really dark place. Everything was kind of off the rails. Life was not going the way that I thought it would be whatsoever. And looking back now and kind of seeing where things were and how they had been, I realized that God had sent lots of little points of light for me. At the time, a lot of those I said no, and I just continued down my destructive path. But eventually, God really got my attention and brought me out of that situation through circumstances that only He could have orchestrated. It was totally a God thing. And it's been a learning process since then. I had a lot of guilt and shame tied up in all of it, and really I think that's part of the reason why the story of the woman at the well resonates with me so much. Here's this woman coming to the well at the hot time of day, doing heavy work when it was the absolute worst time to do it, and she was doing it to avoid her shame and her guilt for the choices that she'd made. So I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame from that. And since then, it's been a process, but I've learned that my identity is not in my past or in my mistakes. Truth be told, I have scars, but I'm not defined by those scars, and I'm not defined by my past or the mistakes that I've made. And I've actually gotten to see God take the ashes of this totally wrecked life and redeem them into beautiful things through helping my friends, through my ministries that I volunteer in, and things like that.
Maybe you went beyond the boundaries that you set for yourself, and looking back, you're way further down the road. And you're looking back with shock, surprise, regret. Maybe you set boundaries, but someone else made the decision for you. What I want you to hear tonight is this. I want to remind you we all fall short of the glory and the picture that God painted for us. That's the truth. It's the reason Jesus had to come, to live a perfect life that we could not. And so I want you to know that regardless of your story, regardless of where you've been, the mistakes you've made, the promises you've made that you didn't keep, I want you to know that God has nothing but love and grace and forgiveness to you. And I want to share with you just these two moments that are incredible in the life of Jesus. There's a moment in Jesus' life where there was a woman caught in adultery in the very act. She was with a man who was not her husband. And when she was caught, it says that these men came, they dragged her out to the middle of town in front of Jesus and said, this woman was caught in adultery. She was sinning. She was doing something that we know God doesn't want. It says these men looked at her and they picked up stones ready to stone her, as was custom and the punishment for such a crime. And it says Jesus looked at her and them and he says, whichever one of you has not sinned, you're free to cast the first stone. It says after he said that, he began to write in the ground. We don't know what. But it says one by one, from oldest to youngest, those men left, knowing they had sinned as well. It says Jesus looked at her. He says, is no one left to condemn you? She said, no. It says, Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Jesus had nothing but love and grace and forgiveness for her, but called her and showed her another way. Katie shared this story of the woman at the well. There's a woman who decides to go fetch water in the middle of the day when the sun is hottest. Why? Because she's ashamed. She knows no one will be there. She will be alone. And she encounters Jesus there, and he decides to talk to her. And he has this conversation with her, and he tells her, hey, go get your husband. She says, I don't have one. He says, yeah, I know the man you're with right now is not your husband. And you've had 5 previous husbands. Something's going on here in your world. And after the conversation he had with her, he showed her nothing but love and grace. He met her right where she was, didn't condemn her, didn't shame her, but he met her right where she was. And he had this to say. He painted this picture for her. He says, every day you come here to get water from this well. And you go back, you drink it, and you've got to come back tomorrow. He said, if you knew who I was, you would ask for living water. He said, it's a type of water that satisfies. It's a type of water that you don't have to come back because you have no need. And it's this powerful moment where he's painting this picture in this woman's life who is running from person to person, trying to satisfy a need, but he knows her life and he knows nothing is satisfying. You know what's missing? A relationship with me. And he's like, if you knew who I was, if you only had a relationship with me, it would be the only thing that would satisfy you. So I want to challenge you tonight. Are you trying to satisfy something, a need, a desire that only God can? Or it's outside of God's picture and design and intent that he created? So here's what I want to do. I want to just give you a few moments. I just want you to bow your head and close your eyes. And I want to lead you to pray for yourself. Tonight, with no one looking, and this is just for you, if you're sitting here in this room and you've come to the realization, as we've talked about how we were made, if we've talked about the purpose and design, if you've realized that's not my story. I've made mistakes. I had no idea. Someone pushed me, someone convinced me, somebody made the decision for me. Tonight, wherever you are, sitting in this room, as you think about your own story, I want you to pray for yourself. I want you to spend a few moments saying, God, thank you for your forgiveness. God, would you help me? God, would you begin to show me unhealthy relationships? Would you begin to show me unhealthy things in my life? God, I pray that I would feel your forgiveness today. So take a few moments and ask God, say, God, would I feel and see that love? To know that regardless of where I've been and what I've done, you're right there waiting for me. There's nothing I could do to ever change my worth, to cause you to leave. So take a few moments.